Hi, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Mike LeCouture in Ottawa. Tonight, Carney and Trump in D.C.
And we're getting along very well. Yeah, we'll discuss it. We get along very well.
Trade was on the agenda, but so was soccer, as the Prime Minister had a 45-minute meeting with the presidents of both the U.S. and Mexico. It happened around the FIFA World Cup draw, and it came days after Trump mused about letting the North American trade deal expire. We'll bring you the very latest with D.C.'s Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon and Canada's Secretary of State for Sport, Adam Van Koeverden. Then, more fallout from Carney's climate climb-down. Two founding members of the government's Net Zero Advisory Board have quit. It comes in the wake of Prime Minister Carney removing climate measures put in place by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We'll talk to Catherine Abreu and Simon Donner in just a couple of minutes. Plus, the countdown to the holidays. There are just 5 days left until the House rises for the year. So what should the government try and get done before the break? We're going to ask our front bench. Today, we've got Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Belanger, and Rachel Aiello. First, though,
we're getting along very well. We're getting along very well. I don't know. I think we have a meeting set up for sometime after the event.
We'll discuss trade.
Yeah, we'll discuss trade.
Well, that was U.S. President Donald Trump on the red carpet before the FIFA World Cup draw in Washington, D.C. Now, the event isn't usually political, but then again, the leaders of Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. aren't usually in the same room in the middle of a trade war. The tournament is being hosted by all three countries, and today's event gave Prime Minister Mark Carney a chance to chat with both leaders in person. It also comes days after Trump suggested he could just let the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement expire. Yeah, that's the same agreement that he once called the largest, fairest, most balanced and modern trade agreement ever achieved. So how was that meeting between the leaders? Well, covering it all for us is CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon, and Joy joins us right now. So Trump and Carney did sit next to each other for more than 2 hours, Joy, during that ceremony. What are you hearing about how their meeting went afterwards?
Well, the vibe was just so different. They say that sports can smooth over political tensions. Well, it certainly seemed that way. I mean, I was sitting in the Prime Minister's box that they set aside. I was watching Prime Minister Carney and the Mexican president and Donald Trump. They were all sitting there. And every now and then they'd kind of go out together, meet on the sidelines, come in about 10, 15 minutes later. And I mean, it was like watching a spy novel almost. Like, what are they talking about? Is this the sideline trade talk that Donald Trump had talked about? But then, of course, came the big family photo. And all three of the leaders went behind closed doors. But I will tell you, the big moment was seeing all three leaders on the stage. It was like the three amigos all over again. Will this ease trade tensions? Certainly everybody was in a very good mood today.
Yeah, and part of the reason it seemed that President Trump was in a great mood was he got a big award today, even doing his YMCA dance afterwards. Tell us about that award and why he seemed to be in such a good mood.
Mike, you got to learn that dance. It's part of the campaign here that Donald Trump, he had them playing. Yeah, you do. But yeah, I mean, Donald Trump was in such a generous mood. He was awarded this Peace Prize by the FIFA president for his work in promoting peace. Ukraine, Russia, all the different peace deals that he says he has solved. And of course, he put it around his neck. He is still searching for that big Nobel Peace Prize, but it put him in a very generous mood. He even gave a shout out to Canada. So, all this talk from the Prime Minister's office that expectations are low, they might not meet, this kind of thing. And then they have almost an hour-long meeting. Now, of course, no staff were inside, so we don't have any details. But certainly, after talk stalled and all those trade tensions and his U.S. trade representative suggesting that he could blow the whole thing up, certainly this face-to-face diplomacy is working. They seem to be in a better place, and it was pretty significant that they had almost an hour-long chat behind closed doors, Mike.
Yeah, and we'll watch for your reporting on CTV National News tonight. Thank you for this. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon in D.C. Well, at the draw with Prime Minister Mark Carney was also Canada's Secretary of State for Sport, Adam Van Koeverden. He's also the country's FIFA Sherpa. I spoke with him earlier today, and it was before that trilateral meeting between the leaders. Hi, Secretary Van Koeverden. Welcome to Power Play.
Nice to see you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to talk about the FIFA stuff in just a moment, but since you've been with the Prime Minister all day, and a lot of Canadians are anxious to hear about this meeting that he's going to be having with U.S. President Donald Trump, a meeting that is happening as we're speaking right now. I wanted to ask you, though, you were around the Prime Minister. What were the interactions like between the two leaders?
Well, sport has this really unique ability just to bring people together. And, all day we've seen smiles on everybody's faces. It's been an extraordinary late morning and early afternoon. And I will say that it's been very, very positive, very, very optimistic, and everybody's very excited for the FIFA 2026 Men's World Cup.
For FIFA, but as well, because, I mean, you must know there's an underlying conversation that will be happening here about trade. Do you feel like the soil is fertile there for some sort of a conversation on it?
The soil in Washington, D.C. today is a lot like the soil in Ottawa. It's snowy, and when it snows here in D.C., people really notice. It's different in Ottawa. When it snows, it's just November. But it's a beautiful day here, and the answer is yes. This is the capacity of sport. This is the capacity of international hosting. The convening power of international sports competitions is really phenomenal. So it's great to be here with world leaders, and particularly the president and the president of Mexico as well, President Sheinbaum. And it's great to see everybody interacting in that friendly and cooperative manner.
Now, as Canada's FIFA Sherpa, one of the things that you've said you're responsible for is ensuring that all federal departments are on the same page to ensure that the event, here in Canada anyways, is a success and that there's a positive legacy. When you consider the cost overruns that have occurred for past host cities and issues that we've seen that come along with it, traffic notably, and we know Toronto, that could be an issue as well, I wanted to know what the federal government is doing to try and mitigate that ahead of the Games.
Well, in previous games, and they're mostly games that were not in Canada, let's be honest, the 3 times that Canada's hosted the Olympics, they've always left a good economic legacy as in addition to a good infrastructure legacy. But what we're looking forward to next year is hosting the world for a really phenomenal diplomatic opportunity, a great cross-corporate opportunity, and just to make sure that the world continues to know that Canada is the best host nation in the world. Whether that's in Toronto or Vancouver, or if people are coming to Canada to celebrate FIFA even in Winnipeg or in Halifax or in Saskatoon, which is going to be possible because this truly is a national level event. There'll be viewing areas in cities across the country. Our primary concern is to make sure that it's safe and secure and a great success for everybody who joins, whether they are traveling from somewhere else in Canada or from somewhere else in the world to enjoy the FIFA 2026 Men's World Cup.
A recent poll by the Angus Reid Institute shows that 71% of Canadians believe that hosting the World Cup is only worth it if those cities break even or make money. How concerned are you that the public support may sour once the bill finally comes in?
I think we're certain that this is going to be a great economic opportunity for Canada. I can say that we're anticipating a $2 billion increase in our GDP next year, thanks to hosting the FIFA Men's World Cup. We're anticipating over a couple of years a positive economic impact of in excess of $4 billion. It's contributing to jobs on the order of 24,000 additional jobs. And look, hotels are going to be full, restaurants are going to be booked, parks are going to be packed. It's going to be a great summer, and hosting is just such an amazing economic opportunity. But then we also have to forecast forward, because who's coming to Canada, perhaps to meet Canada for the first time, who will, shake hands, meet a new business partner, consider a new business or a new plant or something like that in Canada. That's a phenomenal opportunity, particularly now that we know that economic superpowers like Qatar and Switzerland are coming to Canada.
I wanted to know what you're basing those numbers on, because that is a substantial increase to the GDP. And there is evidence in the past that that isn't always the case. For example, in 2014, when Brazil hosted the World Cup, fans did spend about $500 million on tickets, but most of that money went to FIFA. And there is evidence in the past as well that hotels will obviously increase the price of their rates, sometimes 2 to 3 times actually, but that money often doesn't go to the workers who are there. So what is the evidence do you have that that money will actually stay in Canada as well?
The analysis that we've done to make sure that our investments in FIFA Men's World Cup next year are very, very robust. We work with organizations like Destination Canada and Sport Tourism Canada. And look, there are good examples of certainly when Rio hosted the World Cup and the Brazil hosted the World Cup and Rio hosted the Olympics, there were cost overruns. But when Canada hosted the Olympics, it created economic opportunity because Canada's good at hosting. Canada's an extraordinary international sports host, whether we're talking about legacies like the Up Express in Toronto from the 2015 Pan Am Games, or what happened to the Canary District in downtown Toronto, or the Milton Velodrome in my community, where I guarantee right now there are seniors and new mothers walking the walking track. As always happens in the middle of the day. It's great for physical activity and for recreation all year long. And we get these types of facilities, these types of updates and infrastructure investments when we host. We can also invest, as Budget 2025 will plan to, in the absence of a hosting opportunity, but FIFA 2025 or 2026 definitely puts a timestamp on it. And it's worth noting that since we're hosting across 3 countries and 16 separate cities, there's not a big infrastructure bill for this tournament. It's actually quite sustainable in that regard, whereas other tournaments and certainly Olympics and Paralympics and Pan Am Games have had to build quite a lot of infrastructure. FIFA 2026 is different. It's using existing infrastructure and updating that infrastructure, improving it to make sure that those facilities and those stadiums can have that capacity.
So given the fact that it is an update, or even those temporary stands that are going into the Toronto Stadium, what will the actual legacy be? I mean, you spoke about the velodrome that you have in Milton there, but so then what can Canadians say tangibly they'll be taking away from this in terms of infrastructure if there really isn't going to be that much of an improvement?
The one thing that I'm really excited for is what I was excited for during the World Series with the Blue Jays, is a huge increase in registration for young girls and boys playing softball and baseball. And what we're going to see next summer is an excitement about football, an excitement about soccer across Canada. It's already Canada's highest participation sport, but we're looking forward to more girls and boys and young people, and look, senior athletes alike, registering to play soccer, the world's favorite game. So we're looking forward to expanding capacity, working with Canada Soccer, and building more pitches across the country so that there are more places to play. Soccer is like the most democratic sport, right? Anybody can play. You just have to go down to the field. It's inexpensive. We've proven that it's a 12-month of the year game, with recent games in Ottawa and one that I attended a couple of years ago in Edmonton that was very, very snowy and cold. But truly, soccer is an amazing sport. I'll give a shout out to the Milton Magic, my local U15 team that won the national championships this past year. I had a chance to visit them and Coach Garcia not that long ago, and they are very excited about FIFA 2026, as so many Canadians are.
You were talking about the economic spin-offs here, and multiple studies in the past have looked at the economic benefit of hosting World Cups or Olympics. They've showed that it was largely overstated. In 2012 at the London Olympics, where you won a silver medal, Britain received about 5% fewer visitors in August of 2012 compared to that same month in the previous year. In Beijing, in their Olympic year, their year-over-year visits decreased. So how can you make that argument about increased tourism when we have evidence that that doesn't happen?
Well, the evidence that you've provided in London 13 years ago, I would use that as a forecast for next year. I'm very optimistic that the world is coming to Canada next year in Toronto and Vancouver, and it's already been said that Canada is the choice destination across the 3 countries. No shade to my friends in the United States or Mexico, but Canada seems to be a top destination of choice for people around the world, and we're really looking forward to hosting people as they come. Look, Canada's an excellent host nation. It's also a place where people have been coming in the last little while as they're choosing their destinations for vacations very, very wisely. Vancouver and Toronto are both beautiful in the summer, and we have the capacity to host a lot of people. So I'm very optimistic, not cynical at all about the numbers that we've provided. A $2 billion increase to our GDP in 2026 is a number that I'll stand by, and I'm looking forward to seeing the legacy of this be long and large, because when you build something like this and you create opportunity for people, when you create this many jobs and you just inspire so many people, it's an optimistic outlook, but we should also continue to be very ambitious about our hosting strategy. I strongly believe that sport is Canada's most impressive, largest, and best nation-building project. And 2026 is truly going to be Canada's year of sport, as any Winter Olympic and Paralympic year is. That those winter sports are truly Canadian ones, whether you're a curler or a hockey player or a skier or a cross-country skier or snowboarder. This is an exciting time. And then in September next year, we're hosting the UCI World Championships of Cycling in September in Montreal. that's really exciting because we are also proud of Magdalene Valliere, the reigning world champion in the women's road race. So it's going to be a great year of sport, lots to celebrate, lots to be excited for. I know that we're also the country that has signed up the most volunteers, and just recently all the kids that can run out onto the field with the players are being selected across the country as well. So it's a great time for sport in Canada.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that optimism, but still those numbers that I quoted to you are the numbers showing that tourism does not increase in the year of a major event like that. So does that not concern you that the economic benefit that you are forecasting will actually not be there?
No, I'm very confident because, sorry, Mike, but what you're doing is you're comparing Canada to Brazil and the UK. I'm comparing Canada to Canada. When we hosted the Olympic
Secretary, I'm comparing them to
Olympics,
other world events that have been hosted, and those have been documented, and you're basing it on what you're hoping will happen, with all due respect.
With all due respect, Mike, I'm basing it on what we've done in the past. Vancouver 2010 was only 15 years ago. The Women's World Cup in 2015 and the Pan Am Games in 2015 provided a huge economic output increase for Canada, and I'm certain that the FIFA Men's World Cup in 2026 will too.
Okay, we're all out of time, Secretary. I appreciate you spending the time with us. Secretary of Sport, Adam Van Koeverden, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Mike.
We've got some late-breaking news out of that meeting between Prime Minister Mark Carney, Claudia Sheinbaum, the President of Mexico, and, of course, U.S. President Donald Trump. This statement coming to us in our inboxes from the Prime Minister's office saying, quote, "Today was about the FIFA World Cup 26 and Canada's leadership and opportunities as we welcome the world as a co-host." The Prime Minister had many occasions for constructive discussions with both President Sheinbaum and President Trump. It goes on to say in their principal discussion, the three leaders met for approximately 45 minutes, and they've agreed to keep working together on CUSMA. We'll have more updates as they become available. And of course, we're going to talk all about this, about the politics, both on and off the pitch, with our front bench. Just a little later on in the show. Today, we've got Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Belanger, and Rachel Aiello. First, though, Prime Minister Carney has lost two founding members of the government's Net Zero Advisory Board. So why did they quit? We'll ask them right after this.
I think that my government needs to be honest with Canadians. With the rollbacks that we've seen over the past few months on different climate change measures that have been adopted over the years by me and some of my predecessors, it is impossible to see how we achieve our 2030 targets. One of the things that was difficult with the agreement was the fact that we had made an agreement with Elizabeth May from the Greens to support us in the budget by not including a specific subsidy to oil and gas. This was not a genuine gesture on our part. She supported us in good faith. I don't think she will support us moving forward. I think that bridge has been burned.
That was Liberal MP and former Cabinet Minister Stephen Guilbeault this week on Power Play, explaining why he decided to quit Cabinet. He also gave his thoughts on the government's negotiations with Elizabeth May to get the Green Party leader's support for their federal budget. But then the Liberals did sign that deal with Alberta, which could see the feds drop clean energy regulations in exchange for the province negotiating an increased industrial carbon price. All of that at the heart of that memorandum of understanding is a new bitumen pipeline to the BC coast. We're also hearing from May, who spoke with our Vash Capellos for an interview on CTV's Question Period, which will air this weekend. So will May support the Liberals again?
I would make sure we had economic sovereignty built on a decarbonized economy. We could do it. We could still do it until they change directions, make a mid-course correction on this PMO. They won't have my support.
So the question was, though, have you ruled out supporting them on other matters of confidence? I didn't hear a specific answer. Is it unless they change?
I can't vote confidence on their current policies, period.
Now, some see the deal with Alberta as just the latest move away from the Trudeau-era climate policy. Two founding members of the government's Net Zero Advisory Board say that have stated that Prime Minister Carney ending the consumer carbon tax shortly after taking office. They mentioned that was one of the issues. Now, that plus the signing of the memorandum of understanding were the final straw for my next guest. Joining me now are Catherine Abreu. She's the director of International Climate Politics Hub, and Simon Donner is a climate scientist and professor at the University of British Columbia. Thank you both for being here, and a reminder that they both did resign from the Net Zero Advisory Board in the last 24 hours. Ms. Abreu, in your letter of resignation, you did cite that memorandum of understanding between Alberta and Ottawa as one of the factors. On Sunday, Environment Minister Julie DeBruin said the government is not rolling back climate policy with that MOU. Do you agree?
I disagree. It's very clearly a rollback in climate policy to promise exemptions to Alberta for some of the most major climate policies that we have on the books, like the clean electricity regulations, with no firm commitments in place from that same province to improve their own climate policies and carbon pricing systems to make up for the lost megatons of emissions that won't be reduced given that carve out that they're being promised. And indeed, we've seen how disingenuous that MOU agreement is on Alberta's part, because they have now watered down their own carbon pricing system in the last 24 hours. So I don't think that this bargain was a bargain. It's not a bargain when one side gets everything and the other side gives everything up. That's a concession.
Mr. Donner, you said in your resignation posted on social media that you understood your role because you weren't elected. But the process around the net zero advocacy body became performative, in your words. What made you feel that way?
Well, over the past 6 months, basically the situation in the net zero advisory body just declined. We did not get a mandate from the government for many, many months. No effort had been made to replace the members that had moved on because their terms have ended. So we were really short people. We were short resources of staff and everything to work with. And it wasn't clear that we had a way to influence, government decision-making anymore. And as I said in my resignation letter, I said this to the minister, that, listen, I accept that we're outsiders, that we weren't elected, and we're here to give, independent advice. It's okay if you don't follow it, but it needs to be considered and taken seriously. And I found the MOU basically just put it over the edge for me. I had been, as chair over the past 6 months, I had been basically, it felt like I was like plugging all the holes in the dam with every limb I could find. And the MOU just put it over the edge. And I couldn't do another briefing with the minister and look myself in the eye afterwards if I was, because of the MOU.
Ms. Abreu, did you feel the same way?
The MOU was the final straw, absolutely, but this isn't the first step that we've seen to the suspension, the delay, the dismantling of climate policy in Canada. With the budget, we saw the so-called climate competitiveness strategy, and the only thing that it did for the climate was roll back existing climate policies without putting any alternative measures in place. A lot of how this is being talked about is a move away from the Trudeau era of climate policy. And it's all right if a new government comes in and says, we want to have a different approach to tackling the climate crisis. This government has said consistently, we're going to stick with our climate targets. If you're going to deliver on climate targets, you actually have to have climate policies to do that. And so if they're going to say, we're going to kill these climate policies, they have to have something to replace the climate policies with to actually deliver on those climate targets that, I have to remind us all, are enshrined in Canadian law. And that was ultimately why I chose to step away from it.
Oh, it seems like we're having
the law that body.
We're just having an issue with Ms. Abreu's connection there. Mr. Donner, though, I wanted to ask you, we heard this week from former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, who did leave another role in cabinet because he said he had a profound disagreement with Prime Minister Carney and his current climate policies. What does his resignation say to you about the current direction of the government's climate policy?
I think one of the things that's maybe not appreciated enough about former Minister Guilbeault is that he was an environmentalist that came into office, and it's one thing to be on the outside where you can throw rocks. It's another thing to decide to be on the inside and allow people to throw the rocks at you, right? Like when you're in office, you end up having to compromise. And so I think his willingness to do that always took a lot of guts. And I think it just says that he was willing to compromise a little bit, but this was beyond the pale. And I think a key thing that Stephen Guilbeault is saying is it was the dishonesty of the MOU. I would call the MOU not just disappointing on a policy standpoint, but it's deeply cynical because it's saying that it's doing something. It's saying it's about climate competitiveness, and it isn't. The pipeline for carbon capture deal would increase emissions. The math on that is not very complicated. And so, again, I'm not a politician, and so maybe this is good political math, but I'm a scientist, and I can tell you it's bad actual math.
Ms. Abreu, just in closing, in 2015, when he was the head of the Bank of Canada, Mark Carney made what was called a landmark speech to the Lloyds of London. In it, he said, quote, "The challenges currently posed by climate change pale in significance compared with what might come." How do you reconcile with what you're hearing there from Mr. Carney, from what you're hearing from Prime Minister Carney in the last couple of weeks?
I think most of us were expecting a lot more from Prime Minister Carney when it comes to climate action, but also when it comes to modernizing Canada's economy to pair climate action with strong industrial planning that can bring the Canadian economy into the growing green economy that many of our global peers are already taking advantage of. I think we've seen a really disappointing lack of imagination and innovation so far from Prime Minister Carney in thinking about how we can develop projects, yes, to increase Canadian prosperity in a way that is aligned with meeting our climate goals. And our global peers like the UK, the EU, are doing just that. We're seeing economic success being tied directly to environmental protection. And we were even seeing that in the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act before Trump came in. So we're really falling behind in Canada and continuing to double down on a fossil fuel economy that really is not providing the dividends and sacrificing our ability to protect ourselves from an increasingly changing climate is not going to bring us into the economy of the future that I think many of us were hoping Prime Minister Carney would have the experience and the courage to do.
Mr. Donner, I've only got about 20 seconds left, but I wanted to ask you about the trajectory that this country is on now in terms of trying to meet its climate goals and what you think of where we're going.
We're not going to meet our 2030 target. We weren't going to meet it before, but we might have come close. And since then, we've just been removing policies. But more so to what Catherine Abreu was saying, we are falling behind in this global push to this global clean energy revolution. And honestly, I mean, I'm just worried about the future of Canada. I feel like we're making the wrong choices right now.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. The two founders and now ex-members of the Federal Net Zero Advisory Body, Catherine Abreu and Simon Donner. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
On the other end of a quick break, there was drama at the FIFA World Cup draw, but all eyes in Ottawa were on Trump and Carney in the audience. Did Canada get a win today, or was it a 0-0 draw? Our footy front bench is ready to kick that one around. We got Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Belanger, and Rachel Aiello. Stay with us.
The country's excited. We're just going to get more excited. Can't wait to welcome the world. I'm really looking forward, as I think all Canadians are, to see who's in our group, and I'll play a small role in determining that.
So what are you going to discuss with the leaders?
Well, we're going to meet with both, and we're getting along very well. You know, we're getting along very well. I don't know. I think we have a meeting set up for sometime after the event.
We'll discuss trade.
Yeah, we'll discuss trade.
U.S. President Donald Trump raising expectations there ahead of the FIFA World Cup draw. And then, of course, you saw Prime Minister Mark Carney, who really sort of downplayed any possibility of the meeting. We heard that from their delegation as well, saying, going into this anyways, that trade would not be discussed between the leaders. Of course, we know that there was a 45-minute trilateral meeting between the leaders of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. It comes just days after Trump had threatened to let CUSMA expire. And it was also in a week where the impacts of tariffs were felt pretty hard here in Canada, with job losses at Ontario's Algoma Steel and BC's Crofton Mill. Here to break it all down for us right now is our front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's now senior advisor at North Star Public Affairs. Melanie Paradis is the former communications director to Aaron O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. And former interim NDP national director Carl Belanger is here. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. And we also have CTV national correspondent Rachel Aiello. Welcome to Friday, everyone. Thanks for being here. Sabrina, we understand that the meeting was 45 minutes long. No staff in the room, just the three leaders. That alone is significant, isn't it?
I think it's significant, but I also think it is in some ways very important so that you can continue to see that relationship build between not just Trump and Carney, but also Carney and Sheinbaum. And I think that for this particular U.S. administration, that relationship piece is so key. And I think that the way that Donald Trump respects and treats Mark Carney, whether it's on media interviews or in private or any of those things, is what has kept Mark Carney's, stock up with Donald Trump and what has kept Canada's negotiating power in place. So I think that it's important for that relationship piece to be a key part of the way that they engage. I think what'll be important is what comes out of that. Like, do we get any leaks? Do we hear anything? I think it's hard to trust what Donald Trump says on a day-to-day basis. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Bill, especially when you consider that just a couple of days ago, he had said, oh, well, we could let it expire. We could negotiate a new one. And then we also heard from Jameson Greer, the United States Trade Representative, talking about tearing it up as well. I mean, do we take this for what it is worth, a 45-minute conversation, which could be substantive, or do we take it for this is what's happening today, and that's all we know?
Well, President Trump said all those things before he was the FIFA Peace Prize laureate. And now perhaps he's approaching these negotiations with a different tone. The inaugural Peace Prize laureate, no less.
There was a medal, too. There was a medal, everybody.
And then they let him deliver a speech. It was a whole thing. But you know what? It does strangely seem to have softened him up a bit today. And you know what? We'll take it. We need that kind of win as a country. Look, I think that there are a couple things that are coming up this month that might help align Canada better with the United States, and one of them is the release of the defense industrialization strategy. That was supposed to be released before Christmas, so hopefully we'll see that soon. And I think that there might be alignment there with some of the Americans' goals around Arctic sovereignty, the Golden Dome that President Trump talks about, and perhaps that might have been something that Prime Minister Carney could have spoken to him about to try to, again, soften up the tone going into these really critical negotiations.
Yeah, and Carl, I don't know if there was a goal scored at all, but if there was, maybe that presentation of the Peace Prize, that maybe gets an assist to FIFA's president there.
For sure, but it's a model now for Canada. Maybe Mark Carney could bring a gold medal as Canada's best friend to Donald next time to soften him up further. Listen, I mean, the biggest win Canada got today, frankly, is ending up against Qatar in that group. We're going to win against them. We can probably draw against Switzerland, and who knows what's going to happen. Hopefully, Italy makes it through that playoff because we can beat them too. That's the biggest win. The rest,
the Italian-Canadian community. Look, we will hand out his email address at the end of this. As Rachel, we're holding Rachel back, Carl. But please continue. Please continue.
I mean, frankly, I don't have any hope of anything being solved anytime soon. And frankly, I like the way that the government is holding expectations lower. Because prior to that, they were always raising expectations. We'll get a deal by the G7. We'll get the deal by the end of the summer. Now we're discussing, and it's positive because there was not supposed to be any discussion. So it's a step forward, and politically, it's better than the opposite.
Rachel, what do you read from that readout? Because there were some things in there that sort of gave an indication that, okay, hey, things went okay.
Who cares, Mike? It's a detail.
Yeah,
it's a detail.
True.
No, in all seriousness, I think it is at least something that there is the agreement to continue to work together on CUSMA. So as a concept, that trilateral trade deal remains something they're working on. Are they working towards renewing it? Are they working towards scrapping it? That's kind of the question that remains unclear from the Prime Minister's office in that readout we just received. I think I agree with Carl in the sense of the tempering expectations heading into this meeting in D.C. was probably wise for the Prime Minister and his office, although I do think it was a bit unrealistic early on to suggest that they were only going to go down and talk soccer, and that this massive elephant in the room that is like hanging on the balance of so many Canadians' jobs was not going to be discussed at all, especially after what we saw this week with layoffs, for example. So, you know, we'll see what comes from this if Trump was softened up enough. But I do think this was kind of just one neutral, hey, how are ya, go sports. Place setter, and not really going to be a substantive change to whether or not CUSMA is getting scrapped.
Yeah, I mean, you know, President Trump did mention to the president of FIFA that maybe they need to change American football's name because, hey, yeah, you actually do use feet with soccer. So I don't know how sporty that conversation was. I do believe we have the tweet from President Sheinbaum, and it has a photo of the three leaders. And this is, I think, one of the first official photos we are seeing of it. If we can, there it is right there. It's the three standing there posing for that photo. And I think that was just before the actual meeting or somewhere during the meeting, Sabrina. I mean, obviously all of them smile, so that's a good sign. And the fact that they are willing to pose for that photo, also a good sign, Sabrina. But, you know, how much do you think moves well, let's say moves the ball forward, because we're talking soccer here, right?
Not the best trilateral photo. I'll just draw everyone's attention to that time when we had those three handshakes. That's got to be the best photo of all time. But I think that I mean,
it's better than Sheinbaum standing over him like Angela Merkel did at the G7 in Charlevoix. Let's be honest.
I think that, I think that Donald Trump's position will continue to change over the next several weeks. One is we get closer to the midterms, and two is his own domestic polling changes, right? Like, I think his polling now is somewhere between 35 and 41%, depending on which agency you look at. And that's going to start to affect him, not just politically, but personally. Like, he is deeply personally affected by those things. And so I think it'll really matter how that plays out and what that implication has in the different states that matter to him and to the Republicans going forward into the midterms, and economically what those relationships hold with Canada. So I think there's a lot to still be determined. I think this is just another blip in that ongoing turmoil of Canada-US relations.
And Mel, despite the fact, like Carl had said, there were a number of deadlines set, do you think that Canada actually benefits from this kind of being in a state of almost pause, or hey, everything's okay for now, but we'll keep talking, when you consider that the midterms are not that far away?
So no, we don't benefit from it because it still causes a tremendous amount of uncertainty in terms of people thinking about it, making investments here, businesses thinking about either staying here or coming to Canada. That part is still a very high pressure. And, we can't forget that this was a commitment that Prime Minister Carney made, that he would get a deal done in the summer. And here we are many months later, and we're no closer. In fact, we're probably further away from a deal right now, especially with Trump making these threats that he could just let CUSMA expire. Granted, he makes that threat, it won't actually expire for years. Even if he chose to walk away from it, we would just be in this permanent, awful, miserable cycle of continuing to review it every year.
Yeah, but at the same time, he thinks that the FIFA Peace Prize is something as well, Mel. So, I mean, there's that. Okay, we're going to have to take a quick commercial break, but the front bench is sticking around. We're going to have a preview of the final 5 legislative days of 2025. Stay right back. Stay right there. We'll be right back. Is a live look at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, where the Prime Minister is set to deliver remarks at a tree lighting ceremony. We're hearing right there from Canadian Ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hillman. We will bring you the Prime Minister as soon as he begins to speak. Meantime, though, the MPs are in that final stretch before the holiday break. Monday is the start of the 5-day countdown to the House taking that Christmas break. So what should we expect for the last few sitting days of 2025? Let's bring back our front bench. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, Carl Boulanger, and Rachel Aiello. Rachel, you start us off. What are you looking for in these last 5 days?
Yeah, well, 5 days if they don't go early.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a number of bills the government's looking to get passed. The main one would be the budget implementation bill. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's still at second reading. But there is something else happening next week that I think is worth flagging. The Conservatives have an opposition day on Tuesday, and they've already put notice a motion about the MOU in Alberta. The plan is, Mike, for that to be debated and voted on Tuesday. And the wording of it essentially is pulled right from the Memorandum of Understanding with Alberta. The Conservatives say that they are wanting to get the Liberals on record to stand up in the House of Commons and say whether they support this or not. Essentially, the MOU wants the House to take note or the motion, wants the House to take note of the MOU and say that they support a pipeline, and then that would move from a BC port to an Asian market and would require potentially a carve-out to the tanker ban and some Indigenous consultation. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where the Liberals' votes fall on that, right, if it's whipped or not, and what we're going to get in terms of any other notices of clear dissent from within the Liberal caucus to this proposal and this entire kind of conversation around the energy deal with Alberta.
Melanie, the political calculation of doing that and making Liberals stand up to a motion like that, which is essentially, do you support a pipeline or not?
Yeah, I love this. So right before the Christmas break, before MPs are to go back to their ridings and face their constituents for the next 6 weeks, they're going to be forced to vote on whether or not they support this MOU and whether or not they would accept a carve-out to the tanker ban. I think that it's a really smart move by the Conservatives to apply this pressure on a Liberal caucus that appears to have divisions, and they're really like picking at those scabs right now. It's a really great political move. It's also going to force more conversation over the next few weeks about the tanker ban in particular. I think most of the country doesn't understand why it exists, and that people are going to need to start explaining what this is and why people feel so strongly about upholding it.
Okay, I do want the other two to jump in on this, but first we do have to go back to Washington, D.C., where the Prime Minister is speaking at the Canadian Embassy there. We'll listen in right now.
And being here with tonight, and thanks for your services, Governor, great border state of Canada, a good friend of Canada, and thank you for what you're doing in the administration. Sherpa Van Couverden, thanks for winning a gold medal for Canada. Thank you for doing your service in the cabinet. Sherpa from Mexico, thank you as well for being here, everyone, tonight. I do want to just linger, though. Victor, there we go. We've got Canada's man at FIFA. Now, I'm just going to actually mention something that there was the draw and the names of all the teams and everything. And the President Sheinbaum and President Trump and I were talking as the draw was coming up. I don't think they'll mind. Gianni might mind I tell this story, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. It's too late now. I got to tell the story. And Paraguay comes up. Paraguay gets picked. And I said, well, Paraguay, they're good. They're good. But don't worry. Don't worry, President Trump says, okay, so they're good. I said, but don't worry, they're not, no, they won't be, because they're supposed to be, you're D, so they'll be in C. And then one of the rules kicks in and they get moved over to D. So Paraguay's in the U.S. And the president's like, well, that's not good. I was like, don't worry. These are just recommendations. We have to sign off on them. I don't think. Gianni was not. He didn't find that as funny as the rest of us did. And you know the way the president sometimes gets something in his mind? He kept coming back to that as we were going on. So look at the draw as being indicative. It's indicative, the draw as it is. But, this is about the beautiful game. It's about the world coming together. Sharing values is about peace as well. And that's true. It is such a unifying event. It is also about winning, though. And there is an element of winning. And so my last acknowledgement I want to make before I go into my 20-minute speech is is of the ultimate winner in my lifetime, which is Wayne Gretzky, the great one. Wayne, thank you for being here. Janet, the greater one, for being here. Their son, Tristan, the next one, thanks for being here as well, though. But in all truth, if you grow up in Canada, certainly if you grew up as I did in Edmonton, and you saw just commitment, excellence, day in, day out, whether it was an exhibition game or a final game of the Stanley Cup, the class and leadership, and that these are the values that come down. I'll say one other thing. Say one other thing in my acknowledgments. I'll just make one other point before I go into this speech, which has been carefully prepared and went off script. But just a sign of the ties between our nations. Our coach, Jesse Marsh, who is here, one of the great American soccer players. And there he is, just out of eyesight, and dedicating to Canada. And you will find no fiercer patriot than Jesse. Canadian patriot for Jesse, to be clear. Okay, but why are we here? We are here to light this tree. And I'll just say a few words about this because not everyone knows the full story of this. The story of this tree began in a tragic moment in Canada's history, 1917, and the Halifax explosion. A steamship loaded with explosives collided with another ship. It caused the largest non-nuclear explosion ever seen, or felt, I guess, unfortunately felt. 2,000 people died, hundreds more brutally injured, blinded by the glass. And what happened, and it has to be said, before Ottawa could respond, that's all changed now, but before Ottawa could respond, the people of Boston responded. They got a train, doctors, nurses, medical supplies, food, and they made it to Halifax to begin the rebuilding and treat the wounded. And that's friendship, unsolicited, outpouring. And the people of Halifax, people of Canada have not forgotten that kindness. And ever since that moment, a tree has been sent to Boston, and it's lit there. And a few decades later, the tradition began here. It's also true, I think I'm right in saying, no one checked their phones, that you have the highest concentration of Boston Bruin fans in Nova Scotia in Canada. This is true. This is true because of that reach out. So this is a tradition that's existed for generations, and we're all privileged to be part of it. Et il y a un conseil de sapin. Un conseil de sapin de Noël de Nouvelle-Écosse. C'est une grande job.
Of the Nova Scotia Christmas tree. It's a big job in Canada, and the Council begins their search 6 months before the event in order to find the best tree for Washington and Boston. And there are families everywhere, all over Nova Scotia, who try to get selected, to have their tree selected.
This year's choice of the Tree Council comes from the DeLong's family farm in Lunenburg County on the south shore of Nova Scotia. A great place to holiday, I might add. You know, the holidays bring in to perspective the ties that we have, the ties of families, the ties across borders, the ties of friendship, and the common values that we share. And I can think of no better event to bring together the values that football represents, the beautiful game, the values that the holidays represent, and the values that Canada, the United States, and Mexico share. We will be welcoming the world in the shape of 45 teams. We've already welcomed ourselves. We'll welcome 45 teams. We are looking forward in Canada, assuming that the draw stays the same. Gianni might have missed that bit of the speech. Assuming the draw stays the same, Canada will be welcoming Qatar, which put on an absolutely extraordinary World Cup
just under 4 years ago. Well, 3 years ago, I guess it was, right? 3 years ago exact, yeah. I had the privilege of being there and had the privilege of seeing Alphonso Davis's goal. Yeah, Yo is right. That's what I said. Actually, I didn't know my Apple Watch could go to 200 beats a minute, but it did when it went in. But we welcoming Qatar, Switzerland, and a team to be determined later that could be Italy. Could be Italy, could be Wales, could be Northern Ireland, could be Bosnia, right? Wow. Okay, whoever shows up, they're going to be fantastic. And we look forward to welcoming everyone. Look, I will just finish really where I started. Yeah, I'll say it's a moment of great pride for me as Prime Minister. On behalf of, if I may, the mayors of Toronto and Vancouver, absolutely exceptional world-class cities that are hosting. It's a moment of pride for us to be in the World Cup. It's a moment of pride to be welcoming the world. And it's a moment of pride and really joy to be sharing this experience, tonight's experience and the World Cup experience with our dear neighbors, Mexico and the United States. So, merci tout le monde. I get the pleasure now. I'm going to hand to the President. Is that right? May I hand
that is your Power Play Week in Politics. Thank you so much. You've been watching Mark Carney at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C. for the tree lighting ceremony. We're going to have to leave it right there. We appreciate you for it. Thank you for spending your time with us. I want to thank everybody on our panel. Unfortunately, we didn't get everybody in. One last round, Carl Boulanger, Rachel Aiello, Sabrina Grover, and Melanie Panizzi. Have yourselves a great weekend, but stay tuned because your top headlines are just ahead.